Welcome to another episode of the Life Creative Podcast. This is a show dedicated to helping you get the most from your creativity, offering you inspiration, suggestions, and discussion. So let's get on with the show. All right, everybody, we got another episode here. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about the square. Not being square, because nobody ever should be square. But what do I mean by square? So, as I've been learning my new camera, and I'll talk about that in some future episodes, it reminded me there's a setting in there that lets me go back to something old school, which actually has benefits in the new school, as it were. So what the hell am I talking about? Well, in the camera, I can set it to show me, because they're all electronic viewfinders now, I can say just, set the format, the aspect ratio of the image to 1:1. So essentially I'm shooting a square frame. Now, the viewfinder, being electronic, and of course the display on the back, also shows me that square frame. Now, those of you who are old school photography may automatically see where I'm going with this. The format that I'm talking about is essentially 120 roll film, and it was a 2¼ inch square negative. Now, the beauty of this was that you could shoot frames, and then later on you could decide which way you want to crop it. Now, you obviously have to take that into account when you're taking the photograph, but it removes a restriction that you have to decide at the time of taking the picture, which is, do I want to shoot this landscape? Do I want to shoot this portrait? A lot of the time, maybe you can go either way and it's fine. But there are certain shots where, it's a landscape, right? Or it's a portrait. You know what I'm talking about. Now, when I was printing photographs for wedding photographers and portrait photographers, for example, and I was working in a pro lab, they would shoot 2¼ square negative, and then they would want, say, a 6x8 print, 5x7, 10x8, whatever it is, a non-square print. And they would, most of the time, leave it up to us, the printers, to determine, to interpret what they shot, right? Do we think that they shot this negative with the intention of it being landscape or portrait? And we would obviously position the negative in the carrier, right, and print the image that way. Most of the time we got it right. But it was interesting because the photographers would trust in the printers to interpret the intention of that photograph, right? Because being square, it was clearly, we had no idea, right? You can't tell just by looking at the negative unless you look at the negative with the eye of a photographer and say, which way would I shoot this? So I actually really like the idea of being able to do this in camera, because with the high definition of images that we shoot these days with our cameras, the sensors and megapixels and all of that junk, right? It basically says it enables us to shoot a photograph square, and then later on we can crop it, portrait or landscape, just like we used to do in the old school days in the enlargers and the printing machines. So I really like being able to do that because, again, it removes the restriction. Now, yes, it can complicate composition a little bit as you're taking the picture, but again, if this is something you're used to from shooting roll film, or maybe you're into film now and you want to shoot roll film, it's something you adapt and get used to. And it's almost kind of a, you look at a frame and somewhere along the way, maybe subconsciously you leave a little bit of space around it so that it can be cropped later. Not too much, but enough that you can crop portrait or landscape. So I've actually now set all of my cameras to be this way, because now that I've remembered that setting was there and it takes me back to shooting square negatives, it's a very interesting way of seeing things. Now, there are, other benefits here, but it's a great way to shoot because it also, again, as you've heard me say before, slows you down a little bit and says, wait a minute, think about this, right? Don't just take the picture. There's an interesting side effect for, the world that we live in now, social media, because, rightly or wrongly, places like Instagram, they're designed to be square images. So the irony here is that you are shooting in the format that some social networks and some sites and things like that expect it to be square, right? So you're kind of already better off, because the other way is you shoot like you normally shoot, and you shoot landscape or you shoot portrait. And now when you go to make, you upload it to, say, let's say Instagram, well, Instagram's going to want it to be a square. So you may now have to crop off content you didn't want to crop. And we've all seen this, right? We've seen it all the time, right? Now imagine, like, for example, you shoot a landscape image of a group of people. Well, if you're going to go square and you didn't leave enough room, you're going to crop people off. Or worse, you're going to have to, artificially create space top and bottom to make it square. So there's an interesting side effect there of it kind of solves some of these problems for you. Anyway, I just wanted to share that in this episode. It's been nice to go back and shoot square again and to think about it that way. Now what I need to do is look and see if, like, my iPhone will let me shoot square. I think it will, but I just haven't really looked at it yet. Need to go back and look at that. Just something for you all to think about. Again, using those techniques that you've had from the past and bringing them forward, but also benefiting from them in the current environment that we live with technology. With that, that's what I got for you. Take care. I will speak to you again soon.